one of Donald Trump's retribution targets, fighting back today in court. New York Attorney General Tish James pleading not guilty to alleged bank fraud charges after being indicted earlier this month by Trump's DOJ. James met with cheers as she spoke defiantly outside the court after the hearing.
This justice system, which has been used as a tool of revenge and a weapon against those individuals who simply did their job and who stood up for the rule of law. And a justice system which unfortunately is nothing being used as a vehicle of retribution.
James' team asking a judge to dismiss the case, calling the appointment of interim U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan, who was also Trump's former lawyer and who brought the case against James, unlawful, saying she, quote, lacked the power to present the case to the grand jury and sign the indictment. It is the same argument being made by former FBI Director James Comey in his case. They will have a combined hearing over this next month. James' trial is set for January 26th. James and Comey joined the expanding list of presumed innocent Americans subjected to Trump's petty revenge. And America is noticing. A new poll from Quinnipiac University showing most Americans, 52%, think Trump is using the DOJ to file unjustified criminal charges against his perceived political enemies. This, on top of his push to transition from president to dictator, made clear again by his long-term ally, Steve Bannon, in a recent statement.
He's going to get a third term. So Trump 28, Trump is going to be president in 28, and people just ought to get accommodated with that.
So what about the 22nd Amendment?
There's many different alternatives. At the appropriate time, we'll lay out what the plan is. But there's a plan, and President Trump will be the president in 28.
Joining me now to discuss is Ankush Kardori, former federal prosecutor and legal writer with Politico, and Molly Jong-Fast, contributing opinion writer with the New York Times and MSNBC political analyst. Thank you all so much for joining me today. Ankush, I'll start with you. I just want your immediate thoughts to what Steve Bannon said. This is not the first time he has said that Trump is going to run again. But now he has gone further to say he will be president. He will run again and he will be president. What's your reaction to hearing that kind of confidence from one of the mainstays of the MAGA movement in America?
Look, well, it's very unsettling. I think the prospect of Trump serving a third term should be out of consideration, given the way that the Constitution is structured. I do understand that there's some discussion about some potential novel theories to sort of try to make it happen. Obviously, this has never happened before since the relevant amendment was passed. So this would be extraordinarily unprecedented to even attempt it, extremely disruptive to the American constitutional system. And not for nothing, I'm not even sure it would work. Trump is extremely unpopular right now. And I would, it remains to be seen. There's plenty of time ahead of us, but he does not seem to be on a trajectory anytime soon to reverse his extreme unpopularity with the American public right now.
Molly, given what we've seen from the current Supreme Court, which is dominated by conservatives, the likelihood that they're going to gut the Voting Rights Act, do you think that the Supreme Court would stand in the way if Trump attempted to sue on behalf of his party's plan for him to run again? Where would the pushback come from? Because I don't know that I believe that the court would be the one to stop him.
You know, I would suggest not taking this very seriously. And because, I think Steve Bannon has been trying to sell this forever. And, Steve Bannon maybe wants Trump not to be a lame duck because that shows that he has less power. There are all sorts of reasons for Steve Bannon to be pitching this theory, none of which have to do with real life. The other thing I would say is Donald Trump is the oldest person ever to be president. Now, I know he's not Joe Biden, so people can't write books about how old he is, but he is still very, very old. And in 2028, he will be 83 years old. And he also has, and I think this is a really good point, he is wildly unpopular. He is now polling at the lowest he has ever polled in either of his presidencies. So the reality is there are many things that Steve Bannon wants, and good for him. I want a lot of things too. I want, I want a cleaner planet. I want, we all have things we want, but this is one of these things that he's not going to get. And I think that, it only helps him to say stuff like this because it gets him in front of Trump, and Trump likes it, and Trump loves a troll. But, we have rules and laws, and the rest of us have to follow them, and this is how it works. So that would be my move. And I think that this, last weekend, more than 7 million people got out there and protested. It was the largest protest since Earth Day. So clearly the American people are not dying for a third Trump term.
You would think Americans are excited about keeping their planet and probably getting rid of President Trump. Ankush, I want to play this sound from A.G. James outside the court today. Get your thoughts on the other side.
I will not be deterred. I will not be distracted. I will do my job each and every day, and that's why I'm headed back to New York, because there's work to be done. Standing up for the rule of law.
Ankush, what does it say that many of the people that this administration is weaponizing the DOJ after, they're not just pushing back, they're standing up, they're saying, come get me, pull up. Like, what does that say about how people really look at this administration and whether or not they fear it?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, because typically the advice to a charged criminal defendant is keep your mouth shut, don't say anything. When that person is a public official, they may feel like they need to say a little bit more, but it is very rare to see like the video we saw from James Comey, the speech, the comments that you just offered from Letitia James, and I think they reflect the very conspicuous weakness of the cases against them. Mm-hmm. I think they're confident that they're going to prevail. I think the odds, based on the publicly available information about both Letitia James's case and the James Comey case, the odds that they will result in a conviction seem very low to me. The cases seem very, very weak, particularly James's case, based on the information available. I would feel, it's never going to be a comfortable situation to be a criminal defendant, but these are highly sophisticated people. They understand the system, and they seem to understand quite well that their odds of prevailing at the end are high.
Speaking of weak cases, NBC, Molly, there's a new story out of NBC News, a probe into Adam Schiff's stalls, basically because there's no evidence. What does it say that when Trump is they're the gang that can't shoot straight, right? He's going after his perceived political enemies, but they aim worse than stormtroopers. What is that saying about how this administration even functions on their revenge tour?
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point. Trump is a paper tiger. Like, he seems scary, but if you push back peacefully, you win. And we see this, we saw that this week with the universities, right? They had this compact they wanted people to sign. And MIT was like, nope. And then everybody else was like, no. And that's because they know. And when you listen to Tish James, what you hear is a woman who can be governor. Right. She sees there is a lot of political opportunity there, and good. I'm glad. She should get something out of this. But when you're listening to her, you hear campaign, right? Because she knows she is being targeted politically, and she should take advantage of this politically. And by the way, if she primaried our sitting governor, there's a real chance that she would win. And she is, because she really has the anti-Trump mandate, and she can point to Donald Trump going after her. And I think that's a real opportunity. And, Democrats in Trump 1.0, it was a very different scenario, and there were still guardrails. But Democrats failed to take advantage of some of that political wind, right? They failed to take advantage of being on the right side of history. Now things are much darker, and there really is an opportunity for Democrats to run against this stuff because it's not popular.
Unfortunately, Molly, my alma mater is one of the schools that did capitulate, University of Virginia. But yes, most actually stood up to what this weaponized DOJ was trying to do. Ankush, I'll also ask you this. When we're looking at people's ability to resist when they're being persecuted by this DOJ, this is expensive, right? I mean, and we've seen this administration has attacked law firms and legal entities that usually protect people or come to their defense when there's government overreach. Comey, James, Bolton, they have resources. What will other people do once they're sort of being targeted by this DOJ? Are there NGOs, are there opportunities for people to be protected who aren't as high profile as these individuals if Trump comes for them?
That's an extremely good point, because one of the things I like to impress upon people is that the most prominent people who are the targets are kind of the people we need to worry the least about, because, as you said, they have resources, access to media, and the like. With respect to other folks, it depends on kind of the nature of what they're on the receiving end of and what their position is. For instance, there are nonprofits that are prepared to defend DOJ employees in legal cases if those cases are brought against them. And some of the, it's harder for public officials to accept pro bono or reduced fees for a variety of ethical reasons. Private citizens can, however, and some of these attorneys, some of the prominent attorneys you've seen around, have been providing reduced rates to some of the private citizens who have been in the news. So there are sort of multiple options here. But yes, in the ordinary course, it could be expensive, and there are some sort of alternatives emerging.